Welcome to another episode of 3Delicious. In this series, I'm sharing practical strategies for habit development and or habit undevelopment. Let's look at a very basic tool called the bubble grid. So, when I call myself a behavioral metaphysician, good morning everybody, holla. What I'm talking about is basically like, well, you have your behavior, which is where you can see what you're doing and others can see what you're doing. And then you have the forces that influence that as an expression of yourself. So it's cute. We like to think, we're on the ground making choices about what we're doing and how we're doing it. But so much of it is just happening automatically as an expression of our state or claim of consciousness. And claim of consciousness basically means like an I am statement. And some of those I am statements are conscious. Some of them, many of them are not. I am an athlete. I am lazy. I am the child that was left behind. Like there are different ways that we claim consciousness. And then our minds act kind of like missile finders. There's a great book called Psycho-Cybernetics where Maxwell Maltz talks about how, I think he calls it the servile mechanism or something like that, but basically you give it a task, you give your mind a task, and then it kind of figures out how to accomplish it. So it does seem like we try to stay consistent with these claims of self, and generally in ways like that aren't that comfortable. So I have been working with behavior change in some capacity since 2013, which basically means like I'm not making this up right now as I sit down. Yeah, I'm talking about it like this, as freely and openly from this moment as I can. I'm constantly evolving. What I'm seeing constantly evolves, and so when I'm providing kind of like, I want it to be up to date. So, which is to say I may not have said some of this stuff before, which is exciting for me because I never know. I never know where we're going to go. All right, so the bubble grid. Anyhow, I was starting to talk about the bubble grid, and then I was saying, like, well, there are forces behind this. And one of the big forces behind behavior behavior momentum we're not a fan of either. Things we're doing we want to stop, or things we're not doing that we want to do. Is the way that the task sits in our minds. Usually it is, I call it task distortion, and essentially we take the idea of what we could or should be doing, and then it starts to gather emotion like a snowball. Good morning. Hey, Shauna. And we start to gather momentum. It gathers kind of like this emotional noise around it, and then the task gets distorted, which means something that could be like easy sits within us as something much bigger than that, because now we're not only anticipating the physical discomfort, but we also have sort of like how it reflects on the self. I'm lazy, I can't do what I want to do, I'm afraid that I'll never be able to organize myself, I'm not taking care of me, unfortunately, or fortunately, because fucks. Hey, I was gonna run somewhere around like we have these ideas around like how we should take care of our health, take care of our finances, etc. That actually is conflicted with other information that we've been given, and so there's a personalization then of like the inefficiencies. That's like, oh, I suck. I was going to go somewhere else, so I wonder where I was going to go before I got excited. I guess we'll see if I remember. Okay, so, which is to say, so I'm talking about task distortion. I'm saying like, well, sometimes we don't do the stuff because we've been wanting to do it for so long, but not wanting to do it for so long that within us it sits in like a really kind of like, oh, I can't. It's like Mount Everest within. So one tool to kind of like get yourself around that is call it a different name. Call it a different name. I know that sounds silly, but going back to the mind kind of operating like a computer system, if you're like exercise, and that word snowballs into like, I'm not good enough, I never, whatever bullshit it picks up along as it tumbles down the hill. If you swap out that word and you call it movement, or 3D exploration, or like stretch class, it is so much more likely and easier for you to start to approach it, because you don't take with you to that topic all your bullshit. So in making these grids, so if you're joining today, I'm talking about habits. This is an episode of 3Delicious, and I'm talking about how to get some momentum. And right now I'm talking about forces behind actualizing what your habit vision is. And one of them is kind of like the emotional noise you pick up, and then that gets carried in the language. And so you can kind of make it just a little bit more approachable just by calling it something else. Hello, this is what they do with pretty much everything. I forget what the official title is. If the crowd can remember, shout it out. Something like, if you call something euthanize, is that it? That might not be the right word, but it's like when you say something you use a word that's like gentler than the word, like what it really means. You kind of like pat it. I'm essentially suggesting doing that with some of the habits. For example, something even like as basic or neutral as writing. If you have this inner pressure that you think you could be writing, or you should be writing, or you don't, whatever, like approaching writing might mentally be too much. So what if it was like wordplay, or like maybe you're doing short story collection time. You have a short story collection bin, that's your journal, and you just put a timer, like basically change the way that you're thinking about it. You can kind of like get in through some cracks in your wall of resistance. Some other forces that might be as part of the task distortion playing a role in you not moving forward is how much effort you think it will take. And effort that you think it will take, again, there's a piece of that has the emotional, like, oh, I should, whatever, that makes it bigger. But there's also like ambiguity will fucks up your best plans. Ambiguity basically is like, you really don't know what will happen next, or you don't know how to do it, and therefore like your best plan of like wanting to write a book, or your best plan of like wanting to call your friends more, unless you can actually see it, sometimes it's hard to like move through it. So your first or one of your second steps and kind of like getting some habit traction might be sitting down and sketching out like, what does it look like start to finish, knowing you won't know, but just having something to kind of like make this big anonymous ambiguous monster into like a bunch of little like forest critters that stood on each other's shoulders to become that is like, oh, that's not that big, I can do that. So with the be in better contact with friends and family, what you could do for your first step is just write a list of the people you might like to talk to more. Don't put it on you to finalize it. There'll be resistance if you think it needs to be the best and most final draft. Let it be drafty. Start out with a really, really, really low bar. The want versus real life getting in the way. Yeah, there's all kinds of crazy shit happening in our heads. So far, we're talking about removing or let's say like reducing some of the resistance in your system so that you can implement or de-implement, implement habits. And I'm going to show you a tool that I use, but right now I'm just kind of talking around why that might be challenging for you. And we've covered like the emotion that can get attached to the words, and then also kind of distort what you think you need to do, the role that ambiguity can play. Another one is like unrealism. One of my favorite things, and like I'm not really around this anymore, but I used to do it myself and I'd see it in people around me and I love, is like 0 to 60 or like 0 to 120 where it's like, somebody who has never done the thing and or has done the opposite for some time picks this very lofty, like, I'm gonna get up at 5 a.m. and it's like the cutest shit in the world. And I think that there's some, like there's just a little, what's so interesting is like we operate in like these kind of fabrics, but you don't necessarily see the fabric because you're flush with the fabric. But the fabric is like that 5 a.m. wake up time is a part of going to bed at a certain time, is a part of like what you had for lunch, is a part of like, you know, what kind of noise is on the street. Like there is the action in isolation that never exists in isolation. And so we'll try to take something from the fabric and drastically move it, but there's not support around that to really hold it there. So it either like snaps back drastically or like it doesn't work. So that's why gradual change is sustainable, because then you can move your whole fabric with you. So with the realism, it's acknowledging where are you at actually, and try to tease growth out from that. If you are drinking, 20 drinks a night, sure, maybe you might go to 0, but a more realistic thing, like if you really want to make it work and to build out the fabric around it, is to go to like 19, 18, bring it back down. And the same thing with like reaching out to your friends and family. If you take that on as an initiative, you might first think like, okay, I'll give everybody a call this week. That's a lot. And, going back to this idea of the tapestry, your mind has basically words for a piece of that interaction. The piece that your mind has is like, I dial, they answer, we talk. But as part of that, there's an emotional exchange, there's a mental exchange, there's an energetic exchange, like, it brings up stuff from the self, like, it is not just a phone call. And so another thing, like, when we're looking at task distortion, when there is resistance as well, sometimes it's because there's an oversimplification of what it is. And so you're like, well, why can't I just throw it away? Well, honey, you can't throw it away because you have an emotional attachment to it. And so if you beat yourself up about not being able to just do something, like, one, you're not accomplishing anything, but two, like, give yourself some cred, like there might be something there. So looking at things more holistically can change your expectations, which then can change how you're measuring your success, which can then change how good you feel about the process, which can then change, like, are you going to keep showing up for it? Really, I must say this, I'm gonna just say it, like, I am the bomb at doing this work for people, like, the bomb. And the reason that I'm so good at it is because I am not putting some, like, pony hula hoop in the air and I'm like, come on, jump, run, jump. No, we're doing all the shit on the ground, which means, like, if you haven't ever done something, you're not going to do it all. We're looking for where actually, if you wanted to start doing something, like, I would start you by asking you to query your life and yourself for where it's already happening. Oh, thanks, Mama. Because it's a mind game. All this shit's mind games, and you want to line up with the claim at a consciousness level. That's really the PowerPoint. The claim: I am exercising. I am taking care of myself. I am able. I am. Like, you move the I am statement, and then the behavior is much easier. Okay, so wrapping this up so she's a little shorter, I was talking about a bubble grid, and I've been doing this since like 2015, and then I got a order from Athletic Greens recently, a supplement company, and they put this same thing on their on a little grid in theirs, and I was like, oh man, I'm missing my merchandising opportunity. Divinely. It's been interesting kind of being on this path, because it's kind of like it's like continual transcendence, and I was really, thank you, have a good day. I really love, like, being essentially, like, true to myself, true to what's true to me, and shit that moves. So it's been interesting developing essentially, like, our relationship to things that have, like, grown past, because when we're talking about habits, again, like ultimately it's an I am claim that influences action, although I've got a lot of tools that can do action on the ground alone. But because my awareness expanded beyond them, I was like, well, why would I do it down here? Excuse me. If I know that this is the true marker. But it really turns out like I've been playing with a hybrid model for funsies. So the bubble grid, one of the other parts of this whole thing is like all or never syndrome, where it's like we don't do it for like 4 days and we're like, oh, I'm off the wagon. Ooh, honey, like if you look month to month, like gather your numbers month to month, or gather your data like on a broader scale, likely you are doing more than you were doing before, which is to say, like, don't be so mad or sad about it. Like, it's cool. So the bubble grid is a way to keep something on your radar. And I say about the data points because sometimes it's like, oh, I didn't mark it, my momentum, I lost my Duolingo streak. No, man, life isn't Duolingo, life is life. So like you missed it today, okay, try again tomorrow. Dust yourself off, try again tomorrow. You know, you don't have to carry that stuff forward. If you miss a day, it's not over. You're not going to lose your like life badge. It's just a fucking day. And I say that with the most love. Okay, so the bubble grid is basically this, and it's a way to keep what you're developing, what you're cultivating. Think about habits as something that you're cultivating. It's a way to keep it on your radar. And each of these bubbles represents a day, and each of these rows represents a day, and each of these columns represent a habit that you're curious about. Another thing, like when you're getting started and changing your habits, remember I was talking about the tapestry. In the beginning, like if you come at your habit change from the mind, you're like, I should be jogging every Wednesday. You know, maybe you don't realize as part of that grid, you have resistance to that because you like to stay late on Mondays to work or whatever. So it's like, look at your fucking tapestry before you start to set your targets. And I have a whole article and slide on this. I think it's called like about committing to goals. That talks about some more of these, which is to say, like, maybe in the beginning your bubbles represent curiosity. So let's say like one bubble is journaling, another bubble is more water, another bubble is laugh, another bubble is stretch. And let's say you're not really doing any of those things right now. At an expectation level for your journal, I would take the bar to about 2 minutes and make it a gateway that you can run through. And if you do your 2 minutes and you don't want to continue, okay. And as part of like the exploration, maybe you discover you're not using your journal. Be curious about it before you be critical. Am I not using it because I don't like the paper? Am I not using it because it has an emotional association? Am I not using it because I don't actually want to write right now? So many of the habits we'll pick up and assign ourselves we really don't even want to do. And then we're like, oh, I don't do it. No, you don't do it because you don't really care. Like, that's not right for you. You just think you should. You heard on a podcast you should. And like, you know, and that's a great place to pick out stuff and demo. But if you're not doing it, I wouldn't, again, like, be curious before you're critical. With the water one, I'd say, like, again, look at your tapestry. Do you have access to water? What are you going to drink out of? Like, see it the whole way through. Even be curious, like, if it's there, why is it there? Why do you want to drink more water? Well, I think I should drink more water. I'm sorry, honey, like, you won't do stuff you think you should. It's not very exciting. But if you knew that water maybe improved the elasticity of your skin and reduced your chances of aging, does that change it a little? If it made it easier for you to think fast and funny things, does that change it? Like, really make these personal. If they're on your grid list, if you're going to give them some of your life, like, what are they going to give you? And then with the laugh one, that might be like, you might have it on here and maybe you do it the first day and the last day, and those ones in the middle are off. Curious before critical. Maybe you need to look at your tapestry. Are you not interacting with things that you think are funny? Are you not around people that you think are funny? Are you sick? Are you tired? Are you, like, there's a lot of stuff before you think like, I should. And that's why, when we're looking at metaphysical, behavioral metaphysics, it's not like, this is why it's the anti-force, the anti-will, because that's really not what does these things. I hope, as you see as I'm talking about it, there's a lot more. And this last one, stretch, you might have that there, and you might not really know what you mean by that. You might not know what you want to stretch, or even how to stretch, or even if you like to stretch. So maybe, again, starting with curiosity, like maybe the first bubble is like, ask somebody for a stretch that they like. In our minds, we'll come up with these recipes, like these maps to where we think we should go. And they're either like, they're like devoid of life, or they're like impossible, or not right for us. And there can be something that's very simple. For a stretch, again, like your mind might be like, oh, I want to look stuff up on the internet. A lot of people don't like to look stuff up on the internet because it's really like, sometimes it's not that fun. So what will you do? Not what should you do, what will you do? Well, I will feel okay asking, looking. Maybe you go to the gym and you just look at other people stretch, in a non-invasive way. Like there's no wrong way to do it, and really all you're doing with these things is being grounded about them. You're being just realistic. But again, there's so much noise in our heads around habits, around ourselves, what we're doing, what we're not doing, that these, like, if there was clarity here, they'd already be happening. And so what we're seeking is clarity, not force, because when you have the context, it's a lot easier to move stuff around. That's all I'm going to do today. So if anyone has any questions, let me know. Intention equals attention. Attention equals energy. Energy equals action. It's an equation that I access for quick reference throughout the day in case I'm losing focus. Yeah, intention, I agree, is like at the top. It's there for me as well. I think of it like I press my belly button, and I'm like, what's my point? What's my point? What's my, what am I doing here? And that was just like a bridge to learning, to remembering, to focus, like a kinesthetic bridge to remind me, like, why am I doing this? So much of our behavior is really just because it was, or somebody else is doing it, and we're showing up to it almost like soulless or empty. It's just kind of going through the motions, like doing the stuff, but why? But why though? And, that level of presence to me can be enlivening and can connect you with energy, which is really some of the point of some of the things you would be doing anyhow, is to feel more energy, to feel more alive. All right, so this series will be on youtube.com/@ShayleeEdwards. This is the second one in this series. The series is called 3D-licious, where I'm talking about mechanical, basically like, what can you do in the flesh to change what you're doing with your physical reality? And that's different than the other stuff I'm talking about, which is usually at the, I'm like, there's nowhere to go and nothing to do. It's both. So this is a way to start to retrain behavior, and the other stuff speaks to those I am claims. Yes, exactly. Everything begins with your deepest intentions. Yes. Some of which are visible, some of which are not, some of which get cutely distorted, and some which express purely and radiantly, and all of which are okay. Thanks so much for coming out, guys.